Hi, I'm Laura with the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, and today we are going to talk about the mathematical number pi. And the mathematical number pi is celebrated on Pi Day, which is March 14th. The reason for that is because the basic number for pi that we tend to use in everyday life, most of us, is 3.14, and the numerical date for March 14th is 3/14. So we're going to do kind of a brief overview about what pi is, how it's used, and some of the earliest times that pi was recorded. And we're going to show some diagrams and do a couple of experiments along the way. So first of all, pi is basically a mathematical ratio. It is based on the circumference of any circle and the diameter of that circle, and it's the ratio between the two. So I have a diagram here that we're going to zoom in on. And it basically has a drawing of what the circumference of the circle is, which is the blue part, which is the outline here, and then the diameter of the circle, which is indicated by the red line. And the diameter is the exact line that splits kind of the circle in half. So pi is the ratio between these two numbers. It doesn't even matter what the size of that is. It's always going to come out to be about 3.14. Now, the mathematical symbol for pi is this. And this is the Greek letter pi, which is a way lots of scientists and mathematicians represent the number 3.14 in their mathematical equations. So we're going to kind of show a little bit here about how the relationship between pi, what it means. So basically I have two different size circles here. I have a large circle and a small circle. And in each one of these circles I have the diameter. Now, I'm using yarn to represent my circles, so it's not really a very scientific measurement at all. When scientists and mathematicians do this, they use compasses, they use very accurate scientific tools to measure it. But basically, the outline of this circle comes out to be about 2 feet in length from what I measured. And the diameter of this circle is approximately 7.64 inches. Now, if you divide the 2 feet by 7.64, you're going to get pi. You're going to get a number that is close to 3.14. And that is that ratio that's between the circumference and the diameter of that circle. So if we look at the smaller circle, it's going to be the same thing. Even though this circle is smaller, it's only about a foot in circumference, and our diameter is about 3.82 inches in circumference. The ratio is still going to be the same. So it doesn't matter at all what size the circle is. It just matters the ratio between those two numbers, which will always be close to 3.14. So another cool fact about Pi Day is it also happens to be Albert Einstein's birthday, March 14th. So that's another cool thing to celebrate on Pi Day, because we know Albert Einstein was one of the great inventors of our time. So a little bit more about pi, the number pi. So pi is actually an irrational number, and that means that when it's in its decimal form, the decimal form actually never ends. It keeps going on forever and ever and ever. And there's no pattern to the decimals. In rational numbers, there'll be an end point to the decimal places that the number goes to, and very frequently, not very frequently, there will be a pattern to how the numbers show up in that. But in pi, there's not. So it's an irrational number, and because of that, that's another reason that we always kind of simplify, most of us always simplify pi to 3.14. So pi is actually used in a whole bunch of different things that we don't really even think about. It's used in calculations for building, construction, quantum physics, all forms of communications, music theory, medical procedures, air travel, and spaceflight. And actually, the Mars Perseverance spacecraft landed on Mars on the 18th of February, and NASA actually used pi to calculate how large the parachute on Perseverance needed to be in order to provide the appropriate amount of drag to get Perseverance to slow down on its landing so that it wouldn't crash on the surface of Mars. So pi is actually used quite a bit in our regular scientific society. It's theorized that the Egyptians first used pi to help them build the pyramids. So that's kind of the first example of how we know that pi was used, was in the ancient Egyptians. Found that out because the perimeter and the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza actually has a ratio of 2 pi. So that's 2 times pi is the ratio between the height and the perimeter of that pyramid. And that pyramid was built between 2550 and 2500 BC. So the earliest references to pi in textual form are actually both from the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and that goes back to about 1900 BC. And there's evidence of calculations that both the Babylonians and the Egyptians made to figure out that ratio. And the Babylonians calculated it out to about 3.15, and the Egyptians calculated it out to be about 3.16. So not as accurate as what we know it to be now, but pretty close for the tools and things that they were using at that time. Now, the other person that we've heard about a lot associated with pi is Archimedes, and he is an ancient Greek mathematician who lived in 287 to 212 BC, and he's actually the one to be considered to come up with the first accurate estimation of pi. And that estimation was where he estimated pi to fall between 3.1408 and 3.14285. So he got a lot closer than the Egyptians, Babylonians did with his calculations. Now there's another ancient mathematician whose name is Zhu Chongzi, who came up with the estimation of pi even more closely than Archimedes did. And he lived between 429 and 500 AD, and his estimation of pi was 3.1415929. So as technology got better, we were able to kind of break pi down into further and further out in those decimal places. And so there's been many, many other mathematicians who've gotten even more of those digits put in. But it wasn't actually until January 29th of 2020 that we have hit the world record for the largest number of decimals calculated so far in pi. And this is a pretty crazy number. It's a gentleman named Timothy McMullen, and he used a computer system which took almost 8 months running continuously to calculate pi out to 50 trillion decimal places. So think about that for a minute. 50 trillion decimal places, and it took a computer almost 8 months of running constantly to figure that out. So we still have a lot to learn about pi, and I'm sure at some point in time someone will break Timothy McMullen's record, and we will get a different invention of, or different estimation of pi from that. So there's a little bit of information about pi. If you are interested in mathematics, you can definitely do some more research on your own because there's a ton of information out there. So thank you for joining us for a brief history of pi.